There is something deeply unsettling about a city that simply disappears, not destroyed, not abandoned in an obvious way, just gone. Swallowed by jungle, buried under sand, hidden in plain sight for so long that the world forgot it existed at all. And then someone finds it, and everything changes. Today we are visiting 10 of those places. Cities that vanished from human memory for decades, centuries, sometimes millennia. Cities that archaeologists, explorers, and ordinary travelers have uncovered, and that you can stand in today. I want you to think about that for a second. These are not reconstructions, not museums, not replicas. These are the actual stones, the actual streets, the actual walls that human beings built, and that the world lost track of entirely. Stay until the end. Because the last city on this list was hidden for so long that when it was found, nobody believed it was real. Petra Jordan, the rose-red city. Petra is the kind of place that sounds made up. A city carved entirely into rose-red sandstone cliffs in the middle of the Jordanian desert, hidden inside a narrow canyon so tight that two people can barely walk through it side by side, and completely unknown to the Western world until 1812. Think about that date, 1812. The world had already had the Industrial Revolution, Napoleon was conquering Europe, and somewhere in the Jordanian desert, an entire city, one of the greatest architectural achievements of the ancient world, was sitting inside a canyon that almost nobody knew existed. The Nabateans built Petra over 2,000 years ago. They carved their temples, their tombs, their treasury, their entire civilization directly into the cliff face. When you walk through the Sick, that narrow slot canyon entrance, and the treasury suddenly appears at the end of it, full size, perfectly preserved, carved into living rock. Your brain does not process it correctly. It looks like a film set. It looks like something imagined. It is not imagined. It is real, and it has been there for 2,000 years. At its peak, Petra had 30,000 inhabitants. Then trade routes shifted. The city emptied. The desert moved in. And for roughly 1,000 years, the outside world forgot it existed. The local Bedouin knew. They had always known. They just did not tell anyone. Until 1812, when a Swiss explorer disguised himself as a Muslim pilgrim and followed his Bedouin guide into the canyon, and found what the world had lost. Machu Picchu, Peru, the Inca city in the clouds. Machu Picchu sits at 2,430 meters above sea level in the Peruvian Andes. It was built by the Inca emperor Pachacuti in the 15th century, and then, within 100 years of its construction, it was abandoned, and the jungle took it. The Spanish conquistadors never found it. In 400 years of colonial rule, they never knew it was there. The dense cloud forest of the Andes simply absorbed it. The terraces disappeared under vegetation. The temples became mounds of green, and the city waited. In 1911, an American historian named Hiram Bingham was led there by a local farmer. The farmer knew exactly where it was. He had been using the ancient Inca terraces to grow crops. To him, it was not a lost city. It was just his farm. From the air, Machu Picchu is genuinely one of the most extraordinary human constructions you will ever see. The precision of the stonework, assembled without mortar, without metal tools, without the wheel, sitting on a narrow ridge between two mountain peaks with sheer drops on three sides. It should not be there. It is there. And it has been there for 600 years. Angkor Wat, Cambodia, swallowed by the jungle. At its peak in the 12th century, Angkor was the largest pre-industrial city on Earth. 1 million people, an empire that stretched across most of Southeast Asia. Temples so large and so complex that modern engineers still cannot fully explain how they were built. And then, over the course of the 15th century, it was abandoned. The reasons are still debated. Climate change, drought, shifting trade routes, political collapse. Whatever the cause, the people left, and the jungle moved in. The roots of the trees are the most extraordinary thing. Over 500 years, the roots of the strangler figs and the silk cotton trees grew directly into and through the stonework of the temples, not destroying them, incorporating them. The stone and the wood became one thing. Ta Prohm, the temple that was left intentionally unrestored, looks like the jungle grew the temple rather than consuming it. French explorers rediscovered Angkor in the 19th century, though, again, local people had never forgotten it. It was the French who told the rest of the world, and the world was not ready for what they found. From above, the scale of the Angkor complex is still staggering. The moat surrounding Angkor Wat alone is 5 kilometers long. The temple complex covers 400 hectares. It is not a ruin, it is an entire civilization frozen in stone and root and time. Cappadocia, Turkey. Cities carved underground. Most people know Cappadocia for the hot air balloons, the fairy chimneys, those extraordinary volcanic rock formations that look like they belong on another planet, the cave hotels, and the surreal landscape that seems designed rather than geological. What most people do not know is what is underneath. The people of ancient Cappadocia, facing wave after wave of invasion over thousands of years, carved their cities underground. Not rooms, not tunnels, entire cities. Derinkuyu, the deepest of the underground cities, descends 18 levels below the surface. It could house 20,000 people. It had stables, churches, wine cellars, schools, ventilation shafts, and wells that reached the water table far below. It was discovered in 1963 when a local man renovating his home knocked through a wall and found a tunnel. That tunnel connected to another tunnel, which connected to a network of passages which connected to one of the largest underground cities ever found. His neighbors had been living on top of it for centuries and nobody knew. Walking through Derinkuyu today, through passages carved by hand out of soft volcanic rock 2,000 years ago, you understand something about human desperation and human ingenuity simultaneously. These people were terrified enough to carve a city into the earth, and skilled enough to make it livable. Chichen Itza, Mexico. The Maya calendar in stone. The Maya did not just build temples, they built calendars you could see from space. Chichen Itza in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico is one of the most precisely engineered structures ever created by human hands. The Pyramid of El Castillo has exactly 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. On the spring and autumn equinox, the shadow of the setting sun creates the illusion of a giant serpent descending the staircase. This happens twice a year, every year, as it has for over 1,000 years. At its peak in the 10th century, Chichen Itza was home to over 50,000 people and was one of the most powerful cities in all of Mesoamerica. Then, like so many Maya cities before it, it was abandoned. The jungle moved in. The cenotes, the sacred sinkholes filled with deep blue water, became overgrown. The pyramid disappeared under vegetation so completely that early Spanish explorers walked past it without realizing it was there. It was rediscovered not by archaeologists, but by a diplomat, John Lloyd Stevens, who found it in 1841 while traveling through the Yucatan on other business. He looked at the pyramid, looked at the jungle, and wrote in his journal that he was looking at the ruins of a civilization that nobody had told him existed. From above, Chichen Itza sits in the flat jungle of the Yucatan like a geometric impossibility. Every angle deliberate, every shadow calculated. A city built not just for people, but for time itself. Palmyra, Syria, Rome in the desert. Imagine Rome. Now move it to the middle of the Syrian desert. Give it colonnaded streets 2 kilometers long. Give it a theater that seats 15,000 people. Give it temples to gods that no longer have worshippers. Then lose it for 1,000 years. That is Palmyra, At its height in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Palmyra was one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire, a critical crossroads between Rome and Persia, where merchants brought silk from China, spices from India, and gold from Arabia. The city grew wealthy beyond imagination. It built monuments that rivaled anything in Rome itself. And then, political collapse, war, abandonment, the desert came. The sand covered the lower portions of the columns. The camel caravans stopped coming. And Palmyra was forgotten by everyone except the Bedouin who lived among its ruins and called them home. When European travelers began rediscovering Palmyra in the 17th century, they were stunned. Miles of Roman columns standing in the Syrian desert, perfectly preserved by the dry air, with nobody around for hundreds of miles in any direction. From above, the scale of Palmyra is incomprehensible. A Roman city the size of a modern town sitting completely alone in an ocean of desert. It should not be there, it was there for 2,000 years. Volubilis, Morocco, Rome at the edge of the world. Rome built an empire across 3 continents, and at the very edge of that empire, in what is now Morocco, on the slopes below the Atlas Mountains, it built Volubilis. Volubilis was the westernmost outpost of the Roman Empire, the place where Roman civilization stopped and the African wilderness began. It was built in the 1st century and served as the capital of the Roman province of Mauritania Tingitana for 3 centuries. What makes Volubilis extraordinary is not just what survived, though the mosaics alone would justify the journey. It is the location. Sitting on a plateau above the Oued Koumain River, with the Middle Atlas Mountains visible to the south and the Great Moroccan Plains stretching north, Volubilis feels like a city placed deliberately at the boundary between 2 worlds. When Rome withdrew in the 3rd century, the city was not immediately abandoned. Local populations continued living there for centuries. Arab tribes moved in. The city gradually declined but was never completely empty. When the massive earthquake of 1755 toppled the last standing walls, Volubilis finally fell silent. It was not excavated seriously until the 20th century. What emerged from the soil was one of the best preserved Roman cities in all of North Africa. Triumphal arches, basilicas, forum, aristocratic houses with mosaic floors depicting Neptune, Diana, Bacchus, all of it sitting in the Moroccan countryside, as if Rome had simply stepped away for an afternoon and not come back. From above, Volubilis sits in its landscape with quiet authority. A city from another civilization, another continent, another millennium. And yet here, undeniably, impossibly, magnificently real. Ani, Turkey, the city of 1,001 churches. Ani was once called the City of 1,001 Churches. At its peak, around the year 1000, Ani was the capital of the Armenian kingdom of the Bagratids and one of the largest cities in the world. Its population of 100,000 rivaled that of Constantinople and Cairo. Its walls were considered impregnable. Its cathedral, built in the year 1001, was one of the most sophisticated architectural achievements of the medieval world. Then came the Seljuk Turks in 1064, then the Mongols in 1236, then earthquakes, then abandonment. One by one, the inhabitants left. The churches fell silent, the palaces emptied, the trade routes moved, and within a few centuries, one of the great cities of the medieval world became a field of ruins on a plateau in eastern Turkey, visible across the border from Armenia, visited by almost nobody. What remains is extraordinary and heartbreaking in equal measure. The cathedral still stands, roofless but structurally intact after 1,000 years. Carved stone churches emerge from the grass. City walls stretch across the plateau for miles. The Silk Road passed through here. Kings were crowned here. Prayers were said here in a language that has not been spoken in this place for 7 centuries. From above, Ani looks like a dream someone had about a city and then forgot. The ruins scattered across the plateau, the river gorge cutting dramatically below, the Armenian border visible in the distance. A city that the world walked away from, and that has been waiting ever since for someone to remember it was there. Bagan, Myanmar, the plain of 2,000 temples. There is a plain in central Myanmar that contains over 2,000 Buddhist temples. They were built between the 9th and 13th centuries by the kings of the pagan empire. At its peak, the plain had over 10,000 temples. And then, an earthquake, a Mongol invasion, and political collapse ended it all. What remained was extraordinary. 2,000 temples spread across an area of 40 square kilometers. Some perfectly preserved, some crumbling, some covered in vegetation, all of them ancient, all of them real. And for centuries, almost nobody outside Myanmar knew they existed. From a hot air balloon at dawn, which is how most visitors see Bagan today, and the plain looks completely impossible. The mist sits in the valleys between the temples, the sun rises behind them. You are looking at 2,000 structures built by human hands 1,000 years ago, stretching to the horizon in every direction. There is nowhere else on earth like it. Tikal, Guatemala, a lost Mayan capital. The Maya built Tikal in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle over 2,000 years ago. At its height, it had a population of 90,000 people and dominated much of the Mayan world. And then, around the year 900, the classic Maya collapse, still not fully understood by historians, it was abandoned. The jungle absorbed it almost immediately. The pyramid temples, some of them 60 meters tall, disappeared under vegetation so completely that for centuries they were just hills. Unusually shaped hills, but hills. When archaeologists finally cleared the vegetation in the 20th century, what they found was one of the greatest cities of the ancient Americas. Perfectly constructed limestone pyramids, plazas that had hosted kings, palaces, observatories, ball courts, an entire civilization preserved under 12 centuries of jungle growth. From above, the temples emerge from the forest canopy like islands in a green sea. You understand immediately why the Maya chose this place. The height of the temples above the jungle would have been visible for miles in every direction. A statement of power carved in stone and aimed at the sky. And just like that, our journey comes to an end. A few honest things worth knowing before you visit any of these places. Most of them are genuinely accessible. Petra and Machu Picchu require planning and some physical effort, but are visited by hundreds of thousands of people every year. Angkor Wat is one of the most visited archaeological sites in the world. Bagan has international airports nearby. Tikal requires jungle travel, but is well equipped for visitors. Cappadocia's underground cities are genuinely extraordinary and dramatically under-visited relative to how significant they are. One thing every single one of these places has in common: the people who lived nearest to them never forgot they existed. It was always outsiders who called them lost. Local memory kept them alive through every century of supposed disappearance. That is worth sitting with for a moment. There is a particular feeling that comes from standing in a place where enormous numbers of human beings once lived, and where nobody does now. Not sadness exactly, something closer to perspective. These cities were built by people who believed they would last forever, who invested generations of labor and ingenuity and belief into structures they assumed would stand as long as the earth itself. And they were right about the structures. The structures are still there. It is the people who disappeared. Which city from this list would you visit first? Tell me in the comments. And if you have already been to any of them, tell me the moment that stopped you. The one thing you were not prepared for. Subscribe to TravelMINJ. Every week we take you somewhere that changes how you see the world. Next Sunday, we are going somewhere that makes these ancient cities look recently built. See you there.